has power. I don't. Who doesn't still have power? Oh, it's just me and Arthur then, I see. Well, if you want to come visit us, we're at the Hampton Inn in Troy. We don't have anything. We're not there. Our cats are there. If you want to, if you want to, yeah, this will be 5 for us. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's so nice to see you all, and I'm so glad that you're here tonight. We're going to get started now. The speaker, as I emailed to everybody, couldn't make it due to an exposure to COVID, but I've got to talk, and so we're going to talk tonight about what we talk about when we talk about Jewish values. So we're going to start on, but first let me tell you who the readers are. Sybil Offen, Elaine Fieldman, Susie Friedman, and Howard Lederman. I'm sorry, just making one little note there. And we'll begin on the first slide, Arthur. We come together this Shabbat, each bringing with us a private world of hopes, of fears, of dreams. Some of us are burdened by anxieties and cares that all but crash our hope in the future. Others have hearts filled with happiness, grateful for the joys of the past week, yet aware that even the most fortunate are vulnerable before the mystery of tomorrow. Every life is a unique blending of joy and sorrow, of fulfillment and frustration. Beneath our uniqueness, we are all bound together by our common humanity. All of us deeply yearn to know true freedom and peace. Each of us seeks the personal liberation of a mind that is not enslaved to conventional wisdom, a heart that is able to love without fear, a spirit that cries yes to our potential. Each of us strives, too, for the inner peace that comes with finding a harmony between our aspirations and our abilities. This is the Shabbat peace to which we aspire. We welcome now Shabbat with light as I ask John and Elaine to join me on the bimah for our Shabbat candles. Here we go.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, b'Shabbat.
No, the timing was perfect.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Whoops. May the doors of our community be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May they welcome all who have cares to unburden, gratitude to experience, hopes to nurture. May the doors of our community be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy, and enmity. May their threshold be no stumbling block to young or unsure feet. May they be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. May this congregation be for all who enter the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life.
Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Likra Shabbat lechuden elcha, lechuden elcha. Ki mekor habracha, mekor habracha. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael.
There are times when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. When we gather on Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are times when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. When we gather on Shabbat, we emphasize our true place on this planet. There are times when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. When we gather on Shabbat, we remind ourselves that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. Let us embrace this moment, a Shabbat gathering to unite, to learn, to better ourselves.
Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomrei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Rodefei HaShalom, Shalom Aleichem. Moachem l'shalom, Ohavei HaShalom, Tzedchem l'shalom. Miyom ze layamim habayim, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomrei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Rodefei HaShalom, Shalom Aleichem. Moachem l'shalom, Ohavei HaShalom, Tzedchem l'shalom. Miyom ze layamim habayim, Shalom Aleichem.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
At one with our forebears, we affirm the righteousness and enlightenment shall be but our torch. We shall teach these values diligently to our children all the days of our lives. We shall endeavor to live by these values in the comfort of our homes or on cold and windswept roads. Whether adversity bows our heads or fulfillment makes our spirits soar, our hands shall mete out justice to all, our eyes shall be open to the light of truth. We shall emblazon our paths through life with this light as a beacon for all mankind.
Ori, ori bi, Eifo tikvati, tikvati bi, Eifo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bach. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me, and in you, and in you.
That's actually not a new version of Eifori. It's a rather old version. I got a lot of requests for it during the pandemic because we played it sometimes on YouTube. It's got that minor key sound to it, but we'll try it again, see if people pick up. Sybil doesn't like it, but we'll. But sometimes a song I don't like, I grow to love. So anyway, the sentiments are beautiful as always. When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then goodness encompasses our lives and we can begin to change the world.
אם אין אני לי מילי, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, אימתי, אימתי. אם אין אני לי מילי, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, אימתי, אימתי. בכל דור ודור היה ואדם לראות את עצמו כאלוהו, כאלוהו יצא ממצרים. אם אין אני לי מילי, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, אם לא עכשיו, אימתי, אימתי.
On February 14, 1990, as the first deep space probe Voyager 1 left our planetary neighborhood for the fringes of the solar system, engineers turned it around for one last look at its home planet, now 4 billion miles away. Carl Sagan wrote, "Look at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives." The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner, how frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity and all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Nase shalom, shalom olam. Nase shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol ha'olam. Ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom, shalom olam. Nase shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, we extend our well wishes to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Evelyn Krieger, Joe Gaydon, Julie Eliason, Karen Tremper-Harris, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. If there's someone whom you're thinking about tonight who is ill, whose name you'd like to share, we'll start over here. Anybody in this section? Anybody on this side? Good. I hope that means most people are in good health. But may all who suffer know that they are not alone. We are there for them. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a refuah shlema, a complete recovery, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
Nekom hakoach betochenu, mekorot habracha michevrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Mekom hakoach betochenu, mekorot habracha michevrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
If I should die and leave you here a while, be not like others sore undone, who keep long vigil by the silent dust. For my sake, Turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort other hearts than mine. Complete these dear unfinished tasks of mine, and I perchance may therein comfort you. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we mourn the death this week of Amy Good's mom, Justine Good. And of course, we extend our condolences to Amy, to David, to their entire family on this loss. We also continue to mourn the loss of Norm Tepley, of blessed memory. Tonight, we also observe the yahrzeits of Patricia Patty Becker, Lawrence Dennis Castleman, Jacob Abraham Citron, Clara Cohen, Stanley Dorfman, Philip Farber, Claire Gertier, Irving Goldman, Vivian Rose Hager, Lonnie Jones, Erwin Lappin, Sam Liederman, Esther Levin, Annie Pritz, and Nathan Saginaw. If there's someone whom you're thinking about whose name you'd like to share, as we did earlier, we'll start on this side. Anybody here? Anybody over here? Yehi zichram livracha, we say. May their memories be a blessing, by which we mean, may our memories of them provide us with a measure of comfort as we face this life in their absence. If you can do so comfortably, please rise for a humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. We read together, Nit gadal v'nit kadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each, in our own way, take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. I was wondering if I had left that blank slide in there or not. There it is. So next week, I'm actually speaking again, unusual for right before the high holidays, and I'll be talking about the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Probably touch a little bit too on on some issues that arise out of what they've been calling critical race theory. So if you're interested in that book, a marvelous book, by the way, one of the great books I've read on the subject of America's big racial problems. Please join me next week. This week, completely unscheduled, what we talk about when we talk about Jewish values. So this is a popular issue among humanistic Jews, a popular question for and about humanistic Jews. What's our stance on this idea of, quote, Jewish values? So you hear this bandied about the Jewish community all the time, right? It's found in every Jewish movement, in some statement online or in their founding principles, honoring Jewish values, talking about Jewish values. Here's one randomly from the Reform movement: trustworthiness, emunah, which by the way actually means faith. Respect, kavod. Responsibility, achrayut. Fairness, tzedek. Caring, chesed. Community, kehila. Role modeling, dugma ishit, and keepers of the planet, shomrei adama. And usually added to this list, we have values like tradition and family and so forth. But as humanistic Jews, we need to take a little bit of a closer look, right? Are these necessarily Jewish values? No, they're human values. These are the really good values that we want everybody to live by. First and foremost, ourselves. Even if there are Hebrew names, even if we have our own cultural takes, and I'll talk about that in a minute, what we as humanistic Jews espouse are humanistic values, human, universal values. So I was reminded of all of this in all this ongoing conversation, I should say, because it never stops, when I saw a piece back in May by a writer in Haaretz. Haaretz is sort of the New York Times of Israel, named Anshel Pfeffer. And the name of the article was "Racism, Hate, and Violence Are Jewish Values Too." It's kind of a shocking headline. But I must admit, as a humanistic Jew, that wasn't that shocking to me. It's one of the reasons I'm a humanistic Jew. What Pfeffer was specifically responding to was the sight earlier that month of thousands of Orthodox Jews who had gathered at the Kotel, the wall in Jerusalem, and they were singing and dancing as a tree on the top of the Temple Mount was on fire. It was just ablaze, and it was right to the edge. So for those of you who don't know, the Temple Mount is where the ancient Jewish temple used to be located some 2,000 years ago, before it was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70. The retaining wall, in other words, the part that held up the platform, that's the wall. That's where we go. And I don't go there too often. I'm probably the only Jew that you've ever met who's gone to Israel at least twice without even going there. I think we went once with my daughter and Arthur. I said, "You go to the wall. I'm going to have some falafel." But that's another story for another time. What they were witnessing was up on the Temple Mount, and this was around the time when things were very tense. I don't know, it was a firecracker or a rocket or something, a little, pocket rocket had set this tree on fire. And they thought that the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, which is where the temple used to stand, was on fire. And they began to chant and sing with ferocious dancing and joy a verse from the book of Judges. I'm not going to sing it for you, but I'll tell you what it says. It goes back to Samson. You recall that character. If you don't remember him reading him in the Bible, those of you who take my class do, because we only read it a few months ago. But those of you who have seen any kind of movie about the Bible, right, you remember Samson. And at the very end, his hair's grown back a little. He's tied up in that pagan Philistine temple, and he starts throwing the walls down by shaking the columns. And he says he's been blinded. "Oh God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes." So they're singing that. And Philistines is where, by the way, the Romans got the word Palestine from, Palestina. And then they're adding the words to their song, Yamach Shemam, Yamach Shemam, Yamach Shemam. Yamach Shemam means may their name be blotted out. And of course, they're not talking about the Philistines, and they're not talking about Samson. They're talking about the people up on the Temple Mount. And they're singing Jewish songs about it. So what did Pfeffer write? He said, let's quickly break this down. Jewish boys dancing by the last physical remnant of the ancient Jewish temple and singing a quote from an even more ancient Jewish book. The book of Judges is probably around 2,600 years old at its youngest. And Pfeffer goes on to say, looks pretty Jewish to me. I have to tell you, having been in the Orthodox world for some time, people jumping up and down and dancing to that tune looks pretty Jewish to me too. Racist and hate-filled, he continues, without a doubt, but Jewish nonetheless. Some Jews, he writes, don't want to recognize the fact that our tradition contains plenty of hate. In today's Western culture, where identity is everything and values are black and white, their Judaism has to be pristine. His point, of course, is that Tikkun Olam Judaism, the kind of Judaism that we profess, is not every Jew's Judaism. And that has implications for how we feel about our identity as Jews and what we say about Jewish values. The understanding, or the term Tikkun Olam itself, is really not that old in the Jewish tradition. and certainly not old in the way that we use it. It has its origins going back, again, to the Talmudic era. Excuse me. So maybe 2,700 years ago, hard to say exactly. It comes from a verse or a passage in the Talmud that says it's our responsibility to fix the world such that it reflects the kingdom of God. And in fact, this is used in every synagogue, honestly, on the earth except ours. Even the Reconstructionists who had expunged it for a very long time brought it back about 20 years ago. It's in the Aleinu prayer. If you've ever been to a traditional synagogue, it's at the end where they sort of do that bowing thing before the ark, right? Bend the knee and bow, because that's what they're saying. We bend the knee and bow. And then they pray for the world to be fixed such that they all recognize God, Yahweh, as the master of the world, and that they recognize that the Jews have been right all along. That's embedded in there too. That's why the prayer was so controversial among the early Reformed Jews who got rid of it and brought it back, and the Reconstructionist Jews who got rid of it and brought it back. But it had nothing to do with what we talk about when we talk about all the time Tikkun Olam. In the medieval period, Tikkun Olam got picked up by the mystical Jews as an idea that, well, if we perform lots of mitzvot, we perform lots of ritual actions and deeds of good, then we can bring together the shards of the universe. It had to do with the mythos of God having let go of some of himself and allowed himself in a way to shatter when the world was created. It's actually a very complicated myth. But that's what it meant. It certainly did not mean what we mean. Some of you have heard the story. I was looking for a piece of art to put on the cover of some program we were doing on Tikkun Olam, and I just wasn't finding anything when I was searching Tikkunolam. So I put it in Hebrew, right? And what came up? Page after page of marijuana. And I didn't know this, but the name of the big lobby and the company for medical marijuana in Israel is called Tikkun Olam. That's their version of it. In the 1960s, some social justice-oriented rabbi, not that there's anything wrong with that. I campaigned for that. But in the 1960s, some social justice-oriented rabbis picked up on this concept of Tikkun Olam and once again rewrote it for the third time. We don't count the one from the marijuana growers. And that's what turned into Tikkun Olam that we talk about today. If you look at our Black Lives Matter banner, you'll note at the top, it's a little bit hard to see because it's smaller than the rest, it says Tikkun Olam means Black Lives Matter. And we mean that. But of course, the bigger question that a smart mouth Orthodox friend of mine, yes, I have Orthodox friends, said, yeah, but Jeff, what does Tikkun Olam mean? And I said, well, I know what it means to me. And I know what it means to my folks. Pfeffer goes on to list a lot of other Jewish values that would not match our universal social justice agenda. He says, the problem with Jewish values is that there are simply too many of them, and they were purposefully made to contradict each other. If you insist that you're progressive or a humanist, you can still have Jewish values, but you should be willing to admit that it's your progressiveness and humanism that guide your choice of Jewish values, and not the other way around. And that the racist supremacists have exactly the same process. And politicians, they have chosen, or their rabbis and politicians chose for them, the Jewish values that back their stances, and they're just as Jewish as you. You can't argue, he says, that as Jews who yearn for and believe in a return to our homeland, we must recognize the Palestinians' right of return as well, unless we accept that Jews could also believe that it's their right to ethnically cleanse them. And I've heard many, many rabbis say that. Not too many Reform or conservative rabbis. The Reconstructionists certainly not, to be sure. But I remember when my daughter was on her year in Israel, and she was with an Orthodox group, as you know, my background there. And she went to Tzfat. And she met the chief rabbi of Tzfat, who not only argued that ethnic cleansing was a mitzvah, commandment. Remember, a mitzvah for traditional Jews is a commandment, an utterance by God. But that cleansing neighborhoods and not renting to people who weren't Jewish was a mitzvah. It says in the Torah, If you do not dispossess the inhabitants of the land, those whom you allow to remain shall be stings in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall harass you in the land in which you live. Well, that seems, the Torah is pretty Jewish as far as I know. And yet there it is, along with a lot of other things that you've heard me talk about and critique over time. What we have to recognize, and we humanistic Jews, I think, do a good job of this in general, is that for us, Judaism is never going to be a set of values provided to us. There are no sets of Jewish values that every Jew is going to agree on. I think it's why Rabbi Wein ultimately split. It's one of the reasons he didn't want to simply become a non-theistic Jew among Reform Jews. I've been, as you know, a member of every movement possible, with the exception of Hasidism. I've been an Orthodox Jew. I've served in the conservative world. I was trained up as a Reform rabbi, right? Until I found my home here, thank goodness. And I've never worked as a rabbi in any of those things. That was just, I was doing Hillel and JCC, so it made it easier. But I recognized in this movement a certain honesty about the discussion of our values. This was the first place that I learned that I didn't have to be like the other Jews or pretend to be like the other Jews. I didn't have to backfill Jewish values into texts that didn't have them, that didn't have human values as far as I was concerned. No, we understand that we don't get our values from Jewish traditions. We don't get them from texts. When they cross over, we're really happy because we get to sing about them. That's where the songs come from, right? But when they don't, we make our choice. And our choice is always going to be universalism over particularism. And that's a hard thing to say in today's Jewish world. The critiques we get for the banners, for the activism that we do, does not come by and large from outside the Jewish community. It comes from inside the Jewish community. What we hear when we put up a banner that says Black Lives Matter is, what about Israel and Palestine? As if that had some relationship. Aren't you turning your back on Israel because some statement or something from someone who was from Black Lives Matter was insensitive? Adam Shalom enumerated for those of you who don't know him, because we do have newcomers here, he's a prominent rabbi in our movement, head of our seminary. He enumerated a list of humanistic Jewish values, and I love that he always called them humanistic Jewish values, not just Jewish values. He said truth is one of them. We rely on what we know about human experience and needs, and we discover new, powerful truths about our history and present, advance ethical and moral goals. I love studying Torah. I love teaching Torah. I love teaching the whole Bible. We have a whole class, and we have a pretty good attendance on it, dedicated to this every week. And what do? We strip it down to its bones, and we try to understand, where did these things come from? What were the circumstances in which these people were living? We don't go and, as Rabbi Wein said, backfill those comments and those stories and myths and tales with our own values. I find that it detracts from my love for the text. I'd rather love the text the way that I study it. Doesn't mean I don't want to know how later Jews interpreted it. That's part of the story too. But it's a story. He goes on to talk about integrity, saying what we mean and meaning what we say, and welcoming anyone who has connections to Jewish culture and history, and dignity, embracing joy and power and responsibility to shape our own lives. And reality, I never learned in all of the movements that I was in, never did one rabbi tell me that reality was a Jewish value. It's not. It's not. In fact, storytelling is a much greater Jewish value. And for all the wonder that is inherent in storytelling, it doesn't necessarily get across always the point we want to make to our children or ourselves about what kind of people we want to be. Reality does, because it forces us to confront what's really going on. Another reason to study the texts, because you can look at what our ancestors, were dealing with and appreciate what they were going through. And maybe sometimes, probably frequently, because we live in such a different world, make different decisions. Today, we wouldn't write a book that said, you can't let other people live in your land. Get rid of them all. We could never write a book like that. But we also, as humanistic Jews, won't pretend it's there, pretend it's not there, or pretend it's saying something other than it does. Adam concludes with this. He says, also, Judaism is a humanistic Jewish value. And that means to recognize that the Jewish people created everything that is Jewish. We did it. We created it. Nothing came from above or beyond or outside of humans. Didn't come from Sinai. It came from people's own experiences. And when I say we did it, I mean humans, because I can tell you, we borrowed a lot. These ideas that the Jews invented this, that, and the other, and ain't we great? Yeah. Even Shabbat, the one thing I haven't been able to find in other texts in the way that we celebrate it, there were Babylonians who had their version too. They called it Shabbatu. Anshel Pfeffer answers, if you insist on identifying as a Jew, and we do, then you have to be prepared to accept a whole lot of other, his words, not mine, despicable Jews as being equally Jewish as you. We can't get around to building a better Jewish identity without confronting rather than denying those other identities as Jewish too, hateful as they are. Just this past week, I was asked to be part of a rabbi's forum on this new website called New Detroit, new ? Detroit, but it's actually nu-detroit.org. It's a nice effort from some people who felt that the Jewish news maybe wasn't covering the widest range of views. And the question is, what does it mean to be part of the Jewish people? And there were a lot of answers that you would expect, that we were all there at Sinai, that we received the mitzvot, that we share a set of Jewish values, etc. And I said, I actually think that those are not so helpful. Not just that I don't believe that there was a Sinai experience, which isn't a matter of belief, it's a matter of archaeology, but it's because I don't think it's particularly helpful. Now, I don't know about you, but when I sit around the Shabbat, or to be more honest, probably the holiday or Thanksgiving table with family and loved ones, I don't agree with everyone at the table. Do you? No? Anybody have families they agree with everything about? No, it's almost become a truism in this country, right? The uncle, or the mythic uncle who says all the terrible things and everybody has to smile and go along. But you know what? He's still their uncle. The better metaphor, I believe, for being part of the Jewish people is being part of a Jewish family. We are family. And that means that what connects us is not that we have the same values or see the world the same way. It's that we share certain traditions, even if we interpret them differently, even if we feel about them differently. In my family, some people, the favorite holiday is this one, and the other favorite holiday is this one, but they all gather for both. To me, that's what being a Jewish person, a member of the Jewish people is, and that's what Jewish identity consists of. I think that the glue that holds us together is never going to be unity of belief and never going to be the braggadocio of look at how great our values are. By the same token, I do talk about humanistic Jewish values and even Jewish takes on universal values. So when we teach our kids here in the Spinoza program, notably named for a heretic, maybe the first really worldwide famous Jewish heretic, what we do when we teach the kids these values is we say, what do you think about being charitable or loving kindness as we teach each one? We tend to do this around 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. And what we find is that because many of our children are from mixed backgrounds and different heritages, guess what? Both sides of their families and everyone whom they love, know, and respect share these universal values. And the only thing that we try to tell them that makes something Jewish is that you learned a word for them that might give you some cultural insight into how we understood it and how we continue to understand it. Just as Tikkun Olam went from some mystical notion to fixing the world, literally fixing the world, Black Lives Matter, that's what it means. Tzedakah, which means charity, right? Everybody has a tzedakah box. Comes from the word tzedek, justice. This is not to say the Jews have a better idea of tzedakah. Everybody has an idea of both justice and charity. But when we connect it, it makes an interesting cultural connection. It's a word our family uses. So as you go through about your lives, talking to your extended Jewish family, remember that we own them too. These values are ours as much as anybody's, but that they're not one complete set, final and definitive. And that the more we talk about them with our children, and the more we give them both pride in their own heritage's takes on things and understanding, and pride in all of humanity's great contributions in equal measures, the more that we'll know what we're talking about when we're talking about Jewish values. So thank you for letting me share that tonight. All righty. We're going to continue with Shalom Aleichem, and then I invite everybody to join us for our oneg. No, not Shalom Aleichem. Peace be with you. The words there are Shalom Aleichem, but Shalom Aleichem everywhere.
Peace be with you wherever you go. Peace be with you whatever you do. Peace be with you till we meet again. Peace be with you, my friend. Love be with you wherever you go. Love me with you whatever you do. Love me with you till we meet again. Love me with you, my friend. Joy be with you wherever you go. Joy be with you whatever you do. Joy be with you till we meet again. Joy be with you, my friend. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom.
Thank you, Ezra. Thank you, David Weeks, who was streaming this out to the world. Thanks to all of you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.